Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me for session 6, Disruptive Innovation and Business Models. This is week 6 of TIMS7301, Principles of Entrepreneurship. This week we're going to be investigating how entrepreneurs can disrupt markets by applying business model innovation. Our main objectives will be to understand the importance of a customer focus rather than for a business to focus on competitors for disruptive innovation. We'll also be looking to understand the difference between red ocean and blue ocean strategies, identifying key business model types, understanding the difference between sustaining and disruptive innovation, and understanding the concept of business model innovation. Unfortunately, the key problem from an innovator's point of view is that current strategy focuses on competition. And when you focus on competition, you're really targeting competitors. And this is a bit of a mistake with innovation. One-time accordion player, stilt walker and fire eater, Guy Laberté is now CEO of Cirque du Soleil, one of Canada's largest cultural exports. Cirque's productions to date have been seen by some 150 million people in over 300 cities around the world. In less than 20 years since its creation, Cirque du Soleil achieved a level of revenue that took Ringling Brothers and Barnum & Bailey, the once global champion of the circus industry, more than 100 years to attain. What makes this growth all the more remarkable is that it was not achieved in an attractive industry, but rather a declining industry in which traditional strategic analysis pointed to a limited potential for growth. Supplier power on the part of star performers was strong, so was buyer power. Alternative forms of entertainment, ranging from various kinds of urban live entertainment to sporting events to home entertainment, cast an increasingly long shadow. Children cried out for video games, not for going to the circus or to some kind of travelling circus. The industry was suffering from a steady decreasing number of population or audience, and in turn declining revenues and therefore also profits. There was also increasing sentiment against the use of animals in circuses by animal rights groups. Ringling Brothers and Barnum & Bailey had also long set the standard, and competing smaller circuses essentially followed with scaled-down versions of these types. And from the perspective of competition, then the circus industry appeared completely unattractive. Another compelling aspect of Cirque du Soleil's success is that it did not win by taking customers from the already shrinking circus industry, which historically catered to children. Cirque du Soleil did not compete with Ringling Brothers and Barnum & Bailey. Instead, it created uncontested new market space that made the competition basically irrelevant. It appealed to a whole new group of customers, adults and corporate clients prepared to pay a price several times as great as what traditional circuses for an unprecedented entertainment experience. Significantly, one of the first Cirque du Soleil productions was titled "We Reinvent the Circus." Cirque du Soleil succeeded because it realised that to win in the future, companies must stop competing with each other. The only way to beat the competition is to stop trying to beat the competition. Competition should not occupy the centre of strategic thinking. Too many companies let competition drive their strategies. This focus on competition all too often keeps companies stuck. It puts the competition, not the customer, at the core of strategy. As a result, companies' time and attention get focused on benchmarking rivals and responding to their strategic moves, rather than on understanding how to deliver a leap in value to buyers, which is not the same thing. So here we have an example of General Motors Holden, which in 1974 was a world leader in car manufacturing. However, by 1995, General Motors, their market share had fallen from 46% to 27%, and more startlingly, In California, which is a main consumer or primary consumer of American cars, Japanese manufacturers held a 40% share of all cars. How could this happen? How could it be explained? Was it just poor marketing or inferior quality of their product? I don't think so. We do know the Japanese continued to pursue higher quality levels, and that despite General Motors' impressive gains, they maintained a narrow lead in the quality race. However, the deeper and more disturbing explanation is that even as General Motors worked to close the quality gap and the basis of competition actually shifted, product quality became, given in the marketplace, a mere prerequisite for competing, and the wide availability of well-built, modern, moderately priced cars taught the American consumer to take quality for granted. In short, quality became a strategic minimum, a necessary but insufficient condition for differentiation in the automobile business. As a strategic minimum, quality offers no source of competitive advantage, though its absence means failure. Simply put, General Motors was chasing the competition rather than leading it. And this is what the effect of competitor-driven strategy has. So rather than focusing on your competitions, you should be really focusing on your customers. Here we have another example of quite a very strategic and innovative product by Callaway, who was an entrepreneur who owned a vineyard in Temecula, South California. He sold this and bought a golf club firm, which he renamed the Callaway Hickory Sticks. And like most entrepreneurs, he started his new business in a comfortable local environment. He had Boeing and GE, so General Electric, nearby, which meant that he could hire aerospace engineers to implement golf club dynamics and design things in the future, such as the optimal aerodynamic golf ball. Other firms once followed suit, as he was making steel-shafted alloy heads, had drivers such as the Big Bertha, which was highly successful in the market. At the time, however, its design was considered very modern and a radical departure from the older drivers. It was entirely crafted of stainless steel, and the head had a volume of 190 centimetre cubed, or 12 cubic inches. Most other drivers were still made of parsimon wood and had smaller heads. Besides setting a new standard for size and materials, the Big Bertha driver was revolutionary in that it put more weight around the perimeter of the club head, resulting in a thinner, more forgiving club face. The design instantly enlarged the sweet spot compared to the parsimon drivers, whilst remaining lightweight. So this is where Callaway had actually realised that there was an unserved market, a group of people who did not play golf because it was too hard, and by manufacturing or creating a golf club with a larger head, he had actually capitalised on a market that was currently not part of the existing group. So innovation really requires us to rethink the basis of strategy. Is competition going to be the building block of our strategy going forward? Innovation and growth essentially come from breaking out of competition, or the competitive imitative trap, which is a zero-sum game. Highly successful companies do not use the competition as their strategic reference point. These firms make competition irrelevant by providing buyers with a quantum leap in value. This value innovation is also called blue ocean strategy, where innovative firms stimulate the demand side by expanding existing markets and creating new ones. In understanding business model innovation, you must also know which are the most common or most popular business model types, and also see if you can define your own new ones. The most common business model types, other than the standard fee-for-service models, is the long tail, multi-sided platforms, freemium, and bait and hook. The long tail is a business strategy that allows companies to realise significant profits by selling low volumes of hard-to-find items to many customers, instead of only selling large volumes of a reduced number of popular items. The term was first coined in 2004 by researcher Chris Anderson. In general, businesses focus on marketing and selling a reduced number of profitable, popular items. So they make money by selling large volumes of a few items. The long tail business model does the opposite. It focuses on selling large numbers of unique items or niche products. These businesses don't have a superstar best-selling product. They have several hard-to-find items for different niche consumers. The long tail phrase was coined by Chris Anderson, the British-American writer and former editor of Wired magazine, in 2004. He highlighted that when a store has a large distribution channel, it can make low-demand products, which can collectively make up market share. Anderson gave this name to this business model based on the curve that this type of economy draws on a graph. Our current purchasing culture is increasingly moving away from traditional products and markets, which is the beginning of the curve, to a demand for several different products along the curve, which is forming a long tail. Traditional products reach a large number of sales at the beginning and have very high initial costs. However, long-tail products remain on the market for long periods at low distribution and product costs or production costs. This long-tail economy is facilitated through things like the internet, where both the customers and businesses can find each other no matter where they physically are. Especially when it comes to online products that don't demand a huge physical storage space, making the costs of customer acquisition, production and distribution fall substantially. eBay is a famous example of long-tail business because the platform has sellers marketing small quantities of specific items to buyers looking for niche products. There are many changes that have enabled the change to the long-tail business model. So cost of tools of production, the cost of distribution, things like search costs and data intelligence. The current economy, especially with the advent of the internet, has made it possible to centralise warehouses instead of having large retail chains. So the cost of stocking are reduced. If we think about online products which don't need physical space, at most some server space, then storage costs can actually be zero. And the same is true about things like distribution and logistics. Fewer stores and fewer facilities mean fewer expenses. Again, when it comes to online products, nearly zero costs with a nearly infinite scale. And what about marketing? Well, first, web and mobile shops are able to display huge amounts of products. In addition, the business may invest money in advertising, knowing that this investment is targeting the right audience. And based on deep customer intelligence, we've got things like data intelligence now, also enabling the long tail. Engines collect data to reinforce recommendations and product development. The recommendation engines can offer niche, undiscovered products which fit the customer preferences instead of offering all the people the same hit items. This can be applied, for example, when retailers recommend other purchases based on what the customer has bought or consumed when it comes to media. It also works well regarding product development. According to people's interests, producers and manufacturers can develop goods targeting different niche audience. And that's why Amazon, for example, has launched its own label, and how Netflix has also been able to create new content. Another example of a business using the long tail business model is Lego, who has famously been able to use customization as part of their business model for quite some time. Lego began making their coloured blocks in 1949 and has since launched thousands of kits about lots of different themes. I'm sure we've all at some point played with Lego. In 2005, it started experimenting with contents generated by users. They introduced Lego Factory that allowed users to design their own kit using a software called Lego Digital Designer and buy their own personalised kit online. Apart from being the user who buys the kit, anyone can get the kit. The sales of each of these kits in units are also low, but they attracted millions of people to design their own kits. The next type of business model is the multi-sided platform. Multi-sided platform business model is basically a service or product that connects two or more participant groups, playing a kind of intermediation role. Its value proposition is to enable the connection, making it easier for the people involved to find and relate to each other. Most of these companies connect two groups. There's a growing interest in the economics of multi-sided platforms, which get two or more sides on board and enable interactions between them. So for example, Airbnb, eBay, Uber and Xbox. The pioneering models of multi-sided platforms were introduced by a number of people such as Armstrong in 2006, Kelly Lord and Julian in 2003, and Parker and Van Alsten in 2005. We have a lot of more recent contributions to this concept, and all of these people treat the multi-sidedness of the model as a given characteristic of the relevant industries and firms that they're looking at. So for example, Amazon started off as a pure retailer, but has moved closer to a multi-sided platform model over time by enabling third-party sellers to trade directly with consumers on its website. However, Zappos, an online shoe retailer, went in the other direction, abandoning its initial model based on partnerships with shoe manufacturers that fulfill customer orders directly. Increasingly, professional service firms are also moving away from pure vertically integrated models in which all client services are provided by their employees. For example, traditional staffing agencies or consulting firms, and towards a multi-sided platform model in which they enable independent contractors or professionals to deal directly with clients. So you've got things like Uber in this category. The core characteristic of multi-sided platforms is mostly that they attract and serve all groups simultaneously in order to create value. They also bring individuals together and create a form of marketplace. The value of the user is created through bringing the individuals together, and value is extracted and generated through the meeting, and part of the monetary exchange is also the value that they provide between the parties. LinkedIn is an example of a two-sided platform running on a freemium model, where to unlock unlimited search and other features you need to switch to a paid account. Acquired by Microsoft for $27 billion in 2016, LinkedIn made $5.2 billion in revenue in 2018 and nearly 630 million members by October 2019. LinkedIn's primary growth tool is its freemium model. As a professional social network, anyone can join the platform, thus enabling its viral growth. LinkedIn's success is based on its value as a professional network where people can manage their brand, while recruiters can find candidates to fill job vacancies. In addition, it has a platform related to education and skills development. Last but not least, LinkedIn offers the opportunity to sponsor products or services with paid advertising campaigns. Its business model is organised around four primary pillars: talent solutions, learning and development, marketing solutions, and premium subscriptions. The third business model is the freemium business model, and as its name implies, it is free. Free basic services, generally coupled with a premium service part of the package as well, so people can pay for that. There's usually a much smaller percentage using the paid version, but this subsidises the cost of the freemium elements. So Spotify is a successful example of a freemium business model, and you can see here how the business model canvas is applied to Spotify. There are other successful examples of this, including Dropbox, Skype, and I'm sure you can think of many other freemium models of products that you're probably using today. The fourth example of the prime business models is called the bait and hook. The bait and hook business model is where a business sells the main product, so for example a coffee machine or a printer, at a low cost in order to generate profit by selling some kind of complementary product, refill or a top-up. So for example, with the coffee might be coffee capsules, printer ink, etc. And these are generally all at a higher price, or at a high price, sorry. So the next thing we're going to look at is value innovation, or blue ocean strategy. And you can see this either in the reader that is on Blackboard, or you can see the full extended version in the book Blue Ocean Strategy Expanded Edition, How to Create Uncontested Market Space and Make the Competition Irrelevant. So businesses generally compete in two different ways across, or the strategy that's used for it is called either a red ocean strategy or a blue ocean strategy. The red ocean strategy or plan is about the competition, and generally businesses fight for a large share of a limited market, and this is particularly problematic as this market becomes more crowded. However, the blue ocean strategy creates unique demand as businesses build uncontested market space, so looking for new markets. So blue oceans denote all of the industries not in existence today, the unknown market space, untainted by competition. In blue oceans, demand is created rather than fought over. There is ample opportunity for growth that is both profitable and rapid. There are two ways mainly to create blue oceans. In a few cases, companies can give rise to completely new industries, as eBay did with the online auction industry. But in most cases, a blue ocean is created from within a red ocean when a company alters the boundaries of an existing industry. As will become evident later as we go through this presentation, this is what Cirque du Soleil did. In breaking through the boundary traditionally separating circus and theatre, it made a new and profitable blue ocean from within the red ocean of the circus industry. In the study that's part of your reader for this week, so Kim and Moldborn, they examined 108 companies and found that 86% of those new ventures were with line extensions, so incremental improvements to existing industry offerings, and that only a mere 14% were aimed at creating new markets or industries. While line extensions did account for 62% of total revenue, they delivered only 39% of the total profit. By contrast, the 14% invested in creating new markets and industries delivered 38% of total revenues and a startling 61% of total profit. So, why the dramatic imbalance in favour of red oceans? Well, part of the explanation is that corporate strategy is heavily influenced in its roots by military strategy. The very language of strategy is deeply imbued with military references, so things like chief executive officers in headquarters and there's troops on the front lines, this type of language. And described this way, strategy is all about red ocean competition. It is about confronting an opponent and driving him off a battlefield of limited territory. Blue ocean strategy, by contrast, is about doing business where there is no competitor. It's about creating new land, not dividing up existing land. Focusing on the red ocean, therefore, means accepting the key constraining factors of war: limited terrain, the need to beat an enemy to succeed, and it means denying the distinctive strength of the business world, the capacity to create new market space that is uncontested. The tendency of corporate strategy to focus on winning against rivals was exacerbated by the meteoric rise, I guess you'd say, of Japanese companies in the 1970s and 80s. For the first time in corporate history, customers were leaving Western companies in droves. As competition mounted in the global marketplace, there were also a number of red ocean strategies that had emerged, all arguing that competition was at the core of corporate success and failure. Today, no one hardly talks about strategy without using the language of competition. The term that best symbolises this is competitive advantage. In the competitive advantage worldview, companies are often driven to outperform rivals and capture greater shares of existing market space. That's not to say that competition doesn't matter. Of course it does. But by focusing on competition, all of us, scholars, companies, consultants, etc., have ignored two very important and probably far more lucrative aspects of strategy. One is to find and develop markets where there is little or no competition, the blue oceans, and the other is to exploit and protect blue oceans. These challenges are very different from those to which strategists have devoted most of their attention up until now. So research shows that several common characteristics across strategic moves that create blue oceans are related to costs and buyer value. Such researchers have found that the creators of blue oceans, in sharp contrast to companies playing by traditional rules, never use the competition as a benchmark. Instead, they make it irrelevant by creating a leap in value for both buyers and the company itself. Perhaps the most important feature of the blue ocean strategy is that it rejects the fundamental tenet of conventional strategy, that is, a trade-off exists between value and costs. According to the research and the premise that's been presented by many researchers, is that companies can either create greater value for customers at a higher cost or create reasonable value at a lower cost. In other words, strategy is essentially a choice between differentiation and low cost. But when it comes to creating blue oceans, the evidence shows that successful companies pursue differentiation and low cost simultaneously. A blue ocean is created in the region where the company's actions favourably affect both its cost structure and its value proposition to buyers. Cost savings are made from eliminating and reducing the factors an industry competes on. Buyer value is lifted by raising and creating elements that the industry has never offered. So over time, costs are reduced further as scale economies kick in due to the high sales volumes that superior value generates. To see how this is done, let's go back to Cirque du Soleil. At the time of Cirque's debut, circuses focused on benchmarking one another and maximising their shares of shrinking demand by tweaking traditional circus acts. And this included trying to secure more and better known clowns, lion tamers, etc. Efforts that raised circuses' cost structures without substantially altering the circus experience. The result was rising costs without rising revenues and a downward spiral in overall circus demand. Enter Cirque du Soleil. Instead of following the conventional logic of outpacing the competition by offering a better solution to the given problem, creating a circus with even greater fun and more thrills, it redefined the problem itself by offering people the fun and thrill of the circus and the intellectual sophistication and artistic richness of the theatre. Cirque du Soleil found that the lasting allure of the traditional circus came down to just three factors: the clowns, the tent, and the classic acrobatic acts. So Cirque kept the clowns whilst shifting their humour away from slapstick to a more enchanting, sophisticated style. It glamorised the tent, which many circuses had abandoned in favour of rented venues, realising that the tent, more than anything else, captured the magic of the circus. Cirque designed this classic symbol with a glorious external finish and a high level of audience comfort. Gone were the sawdust and hard benches. Acrobats and other thrilling performers were retained, but Cirque du Soleil reduced their roles and made the acts more elegant by adding artistic flair. Even as Cirque stripped away some of the traditional circus offerings, it injected new elements drawn from the world of theatre. So, for example, unlike traditional circuses featuring a series of unrelated acts, each Cirque du Soleil creation resembles a theatre performance in that it has a theme and a storyline. Although the themes are intentionally vague, they bring harmony and an intellectual, I guess you'd say, element to the act. Cirque also borrows ideas from other elements or other theatre such as Broadway. For example, rather than putting on the traditional once and for all show, Cirque mounts multiple productions based on different themes and storylines. As with Broadway productions, each Cirque show has an original music score which drives performance, lighting and the timing of acts, rather than this being the other way around. So value innovation means radical superior value to customers, price level accessible to mass of buyers, so driving costs down but not the price. Value innovation is also consistent with the Schumpeterian creative destruction that we mentioned in earlier lectures. Successful value innovators therefore have strategic pricing for demand creation, high volume and rapid brand establishment, and they target costing for profit creation, which leads to attractive profit margins and a cost structure that is hard to match. So here you can see the shifting strategic focus that we've been talking about. There's the three basic building blocks of strategy, which is competition, customers, and corporate capabilities. And in the conventional focus, we can see that there is a focus on outperforming competition. In terms of customers, retaining and better satisfying existing customers. And in terms of corporate capabilities, leveraging and extending the current capabilities of a company. However, in the value innovation focus and what as innovators you need to be thinking of, when it comes to competition, you should be seeking radically superior value to make the competition irrelevant, the blue ocean strategy. In terms of customers, targeting the mass of buyers by following non-customers closely and willingly losing some existing customers. And in regards to corporate capabilities, willing to combine with other companies' capabilities. This is the blue ocean as opposed to the red ocean strategy. So the next section is on diffusion of innovation and disruptive innovation. There's a complimentary video on disruptive innovation provided by Sorel, and you will need to watch that to see a core part of the element on disruptive innovation. So the diffusion of innovation theory was developed by Rogers in 1962, and it's one of the oldest social science theories. It originated in communication to explain really how over time an idea or product gains momentum and diffuses or spreads, I guess you'd say, through a specific population or social system. The end result of this diffusion is that people, as part of the social system, adopt the new idea, behaviour or product. Adoption means that the person does something differently than what they had previously. So they're purchased it, they're using it, they're acquiring a product, they're performing a new behaviour. The key to adoption is that the person must perceive the idea, behaviour or product as new or innovative. It is through this that diffusion is therefore possible. Adoption of a new idea, behaviour or product, for example, or that is the innovation, does not happen simultaneously in a social system. Rather, it is a process whereby people are more apt to adopt the innovation, or some people are more apt to adopt the innovation than others. And researchers have found that people who adopt an innovation early have different characteristics than people who adopt in the later stages of innovation. When prompting an innovation to a target population, when promoting an innovation to a target population, it's important to understand the characteristics of the target population that will help or hinder the adoption. There are 5 established adoption or adopter categories, and while the majority of the general population tends to fall in those middle categories, so the early majority and late majority, it is still necessary to understand the characteristics of the broader target population. When promoting an innovation, there are different strategies used to appeal to the different adopter categories. So innovators, these are people who generally want to be the first to try an innovation. They're usually adventurous and interested in new ideas. These people are willing to take risks and are often the first to develop new ideas. Very little, if anything, needs to be done to appeal to this kind of population. Then we have the early adopters, the second part of the curve. And these are people who represent opinion leaders, influencers. They enjoy leadership roles and embrace the change opportunities. They are often aware of the need to change and are so very comfortable adopting new ideas. Strategies to appeal to this population include how-to manuals, information sheets, etc. on implementation. They actually don't need information to convince them to change. Then you have the next category, the early majority. These people are rarely leaders, but they do adopt new ideas before the average person. They typically need to see evidence that the innovation works before they're willing to adopt it. Strategies to appeal to these sorts of people include things like success stories and evidence of the innovation effectiveness. Then you have the late majority, and these people are skeptical of change and will only adopt an innovation after it's been tried by the majority. So strategies to appeal to this population include information on how many other people have tried the innovation and have adopted it successfully. And then finally, you've got the laggards. These people are bound by tradition. They're usually very conservative and they're very skeptical of change. These are the hardest group to get on board, and strategies to appeal to this population would include things like statistics, fear appeals, and pressure from people in other adopter groups. The stages by which a person adopts an innovation and whereby the diffusion is actually accomplished include things like awareness of the need for an innovation. There needs to be a decision to adopt or reject the innovation. Then there'll be an initial use of the innovation to test it, and then continued use of the innovation. There are 5 main factors that influence adoption of an innovation, and each of these factors is at play to a different extent in the 5 adopter categories. So the first one is relative advantage, and this is the degree to which an innovation is seen as better than the idea, program, or product it replaces. You've then got compatibility, how consistent the innovation is with the values, experiences, and needs of the potential adopters. Complexity, how difficult the innovation is to understand or to use. Triability, the extent to which the innovation can be tested or experimented with before a commitment to adopt is made. And then the final one, observability, the extent to which the innovation provides tangible, observable results. So here we have another example of the diffusion of innovation theory graph. And with this, we've got the vertical axis showing the performance of the item under consideration, equated to competitive advantage for business organisations, and the horizontal axis showing effort. So this could be time, resource investment, or other similar things, which is associated with the innovation and its development. The S-curve here shows the innovation from its slow early beginnings as the technology or whatever other thing it might be, process, etc., is developed. This continues on to an acceleration phase, which is a steeper part of the line as it matures, and finally to a stabilisation over time, which is a flattening of the curve. And this has corresponding increases in performance of the item or organisation that's using it. The diffusion of innovation into a population always follows this curve. There is a tipping point in the middle where the innovation appears to actually take off, and that can be quite extreme or much flatter. This is at the core of the majority of the population that will adopt the innovation, and this is what we call reaching a critical mass. Over time, the technology will reach its technological limit of usefulness or competitive advantage, and at any point there may be a step change in the technology, so a radical innovation, which will result in a new S-curve that will overlap the previous one. So why an S-curve? Well, here's an example of how this normally plays out, and to give you a good idea of how this actually looks in a practical situation. So let's talk about the Model T Ford. At the end of the 19th century, the automobile industry was pretty small and unattractive, and more than 400 car makers in America competed in turning out handmade cars that cost around $1,500. They were luxury cars, and they were enormously unpopular with everyone but the very rich people. So there were anti-car activists who tore up the roads and ringed parked cars with barbed wire and organised boycotts of car-driving businessmen and politicians. Woodrow Wilson caught the spirit of the times when he said that in 1906, nothing has spread socialistic feeling more than the automobile. He called it a picture of the arrogance of wealth. Instead of trying to beat the competition and steal a share of existing demand from other automakers, Ford reconstructed the industry boundaries of cars and horse-drawn carriages to create a blue ocean of his own. At the time, horse-drawn carriages were the primary means of local transportation across America. The carriage had two distinct advantages over cars. Horses could easily negotiate the bumps and mud that had stymied cars, especially in rain and snow. And horses and carriages were much easier to maintain than the luxurious auto of the time, which wasn't really very luxurious, but at the time it was. And these cars frequently broke down, they required expert repairmen who were expensive, and they were also in short supply. It was Henry Ford's understanding of these advantages that showed him how he could break away from the competition and unlock enormous untapped demand. Ford called the Model T car for the great multitude constructed of the best materials. Like Cirque du Soleil, the Ford Motor Company made the competition irrelevant. Instead of creating fashionable, customised cars for weekends in the countryside, a luxury few could only afford, Ford decided to build a car that, like the horse-drawn carriage, was for everyday use. The Model T came in just one colour, black, and there were few optional extras. But it was reliable and durable, designed to travel effortlessly over dirt roads in rain, snow or sunshine. It was easy to use and fix. People could learn to drive it in a day. And like the Cirque du Soleil, Ford went outside the industry for a price point, looking at horse-drawn carriages, which were about $400, not other autos. In 1908, the first Model T cost $850. In 1909, the price dropped to $609, and by 1924, it was down to $290. In this way, Ford converted buyers of horse-drawn carriages into car buyers, just as Cirque du Soleil turned theatre goers into circus goers. Sales of the Model T boomed. Ford's market share surged from 9% in 1908 to 61% in 1921, and by 1923 a majority of American households had a car. Even as Ford offered the mass of buyers a leap in value, the company also achieved the lowest cost structure in the industry, much as Cirque du Soleil did much later. By keeping the cars highly standardised with limited options and interchangeable parts, Ford was able to scrap the prevailing manufacturing system in which cars were constructed by skilled craftsmen who swarmed around one workstation and built a car piece by piece from start to finish. Ford's revolutionary assembly line replaced craftsmen with unskilled labourers, each of whom worked quickly and efficiently on one small task. This allowed Ford to make a car in just 4 days. 21 days was the industry norm. This created huge cost savings. So Rogers proposes that the 5 main elements that influence the spread of new ideas are the innovation itself, adopters, communications channels, time, and a social system. This process relies heavily on social capital. The innovation must be widely adopted in order to self-sustain. Within the rate of adoption, there is a point at which an innovation reaches critical mass. In 1989, management consultants working at the consulting firm Regis McKenna Incorporated theorised that this point lies at the boundary between the early adopters and the early majority. This tipping point between the niche appeal and the mass or self-sustained adoption was originally labelled the marketing chasm. So what these examples should show you is that disruptive innovation is very much a business model problem, not a technology problem. To disrupt or defend against disruption depends on your ability to innovate and pivot your business model. So it's at this point in the lecture I'd like you to turn to the Disruptive Innovation video by Sorrell, which is on Blackboard. This is some really important information about how disruptive innovation works and where it comes from, and you'll need this information to continue on from this point in the lecture. So being able to determine whether an innovation is disruptive requires having some criteria to be able to evaluate it. So the key difference between what is a standard innovation and a disruptive innovation basically lies in the performance improvement of different attributes around the innovation. So existing or sustaining innovations generally focus on mainstream customers, and they do a better job of providing the existing features they demand, but fail to introduce new attributes. On the other hand, disruptive innovations focus on new markets and new customers by introducing new performance criteria or introducing new attributes not currently available in existing offerings. But generally, they do not perform as well on attributes valued by their mainstream customers. This focus on new markets allows disruptive innovations to affect markets in the long term and disrupt the established incumbents. It's often argued that for a disruptive innovation to be successful, it should have the potential to be improved steadily over time, as with acceptance from customers, the demand for improvement in new attributes will increase. These differences between a sustaining or existing innovation and disruptive innovations are summarised and compared on the table that's shown on the screen here, and they have a scale of low, medium and high. An offering that has these characteristics, or all of them, will have said to be disruptive or to have disruptive potential. The criteria here will help you identify whether an innovation can be considered disruptive or not. So here they are as listed. So performance against the mainstream attributes, whether it's high or low, performance against new attributes, potential market impact, long term, ease of customer learning, future development potential, and mainstream customer focus. So the next section we're going to discuss today is business model innovation. And to be clear, it's not a new product or service that is disruptive. It is the business model that changes the rules of the game of how the business is done. And this is what is business model innovation. So to profit from innovation, entrepreneurs need to excel not only at the technological innovation, but also at business model design. Competitive advantage relates to an organisation's ability to be flexible in innovating their business models fast to disrupt the markets. And here we can see Teese's explanation, or his comment, saying that technological innovation does not guarantee business success. New product development efforts should be coupled with a business model defining their go-to-market and capturing value strategies. So business model innovation, or BMI, is about changing the rules of the game. That is, changing what is the dominant logic in the industry that you are operating in. BMI becomes visible in the competitive space, and it's closely associated with disruption. So to learn a little bit more about the specifics of business model innovation, check out the two videos on Blackboard. The first one is about generally what is business model innovation, and the second one is a slightly longer video from Stefan Gross-Selbeck on how this plays out in the real world. So there is a difference between business model innovation, or BMI, and the innovation inside a business that you're conducting, and it's within the business model. In essence, innovation within a business model inside your organisation may lead to the change of dominant logic of your firm, whereas what you're looking for in business model innovation is about a change in the dominant logic of the industry. Innovation within a business model can be regarded as BMI, but only when it manifests at the industry level. So BMI could be as a result of an innovation of a single element in your business model, but it usually involves more in terms of the broader business, and then, as I said, it must impact the industry level. So to have a business model innovation, essentially to create your blue ocean, you're trying to cross a boundary in a current industry, a strategic group, a buyer group, etc., that will enable you to create a market that is unserved and really doesn't have any competitors. So let's have a look at the different levels that you could try to do this with, which are industry, strategic groups, buyer groups, scope of product and services, or the functional emotional orientation, or even time. And you can see here on the screen the crossing that you're looking to do across each of these if you're trying to shift from the red ocean to the blue ocean. Let's have a look at a couple of these. So industry, for example, in the broadest sense, a company competes not only with other firms in its own industry, but also with companies in other industries that produce alternative products or services. Alternatives are broader than substitutes. Products or services that have different forms but offer the same functionality or core utility are often substitutes for each other. However, alternatives include products or services that have different functions and forms, but may have the same purpose. So, for example, if you were going to sort out your personal finances, someone could buy and install a financial software package, they could hire an accountant or CPA, or maybe just use simply a piece of paper and a pencil and do it themselves. There are also apps that you could possibly use to help with this. All of these things, the software, the CPA, the pencil and paper, and the financial app, are pretty much substitutes for each other. They have different forms, but they serve the same function, which is to help people manage their financial affairs. In contrast, however, products or services can take different forms and perform different functions, but serve the same objective. So consider a cinema versus a restaurant. Restaurants have few physical features in common with cinemas, and they serve a distinct function, which is to provide conversational or food pleasure. And this is a very different experience from the entertainment that's basically offered by a cinema. Despite the differences in form and functions, however, people go to a restaurant for the same objective that they generally go out to the movies, which is to enjoy a night out. These are not substitutes, but alternatives to choose from. In making every purchase decision, buyers implicitly weigh alternatives, usually unconsciously. Do you need a self-indulgent 2 hours? And what should you do to achieve it? Do you go to the movies, have a massage, enjoy reading a favourite book, or maybe go to a local cafe? The thought process is intuitive for customers, and for some reason we abandon this intuitive thinking, I guess, when we become sellers. Rarely do sellers think consciously about how their customers make trade-offs across alternative industries. A shift in price, a change in model, or even a new ad campaign can elicit a tremendous response from rivals within an industry, but the same actions in an alternative industry generally go unnoticed. So this is an example of how you could be thinking differently across an industry group. A strategic group is a slightly different aspect. The strategic group is a group of companies within an industry that pursue a similar strategy. In most industries, the fundamental strategic difference among industry players are captured by a small number of strategic groups. Strategic groups can generally be ranked in a rough hierarchical order built on 2 dimensions, which are usually around price and performance. Each jump in price tends to bring a corresponding jump in some dimensions of their performance. And most companies focus on improving a competitive position within a strategic group. So, for example, Mercedes, BMW and Jaguar focus on outcompeting one another in the luxury car segment, as economy car makers focus on excelling over one another in their strategic group. Neither group, or strategic group, however, pays much attention to what the other is doing, because from a supply point of view, they don't actually really seem to be competing. The key to creating a blue ocean across an existing strategic group is to break out of this narrow tunnel vision by understanding which factors determine customers' decisions to trade up or down from one group to another. So that's how it works in a strategic group. You might also look at buyer groups. So in most industries, competitors converge around a common definition of who the target buyer is. In reality, though, there is a chain of buyers who are directly or indirectly involved in the buying decision. The purchasers who pay for the product or the service may differ from the actual users, and in some cases there are important influences as well. Although these 3 groups may overlap, they often differ, and when they do, they frequently hold different definitions of value. Challenging an industry's conventional wisdom about which buying group to target can lead to the discovery of a new blue ocean. You can also look at the scope of products and services, which I think are fairly obvious. The functional emotional orientation, which might also be another way around how people perceive a product or an area based on how it's functionally orientated or emotionally orientated. So that could be another way, and time is the other one. And if you think of how business or external trends affect businesses over time, you can think of things like the rapid rise of the cloud or the global movement towards protecting the environment. If you look at these trends with the right perspective, it can show you how to create a blue ocean opportunity. Most companies adapt incrementally and really somewhat passively as these events generally unfold. But they also ask, in which direction will this technology or situation evolve? How will it be adopted, and whether it's going to become scalable? So these are the sorts of things that you can possibly think of to shift your focus of a strategy and also then cross that boundary to create a blue ocean. So you can see here the difference in performance of business model innovators over a 10-year period, and where you've had just a process or a product innovation as compared to the business model innovator, the actual performance is well and truly over and above that of those who are just product and process innovators. So obviously it's great if you can actually target a new market and innovate with the business model itself. You're going to have a more sustained effect over time. So here we have an example of a current business model innovation that is occurring right now, or has been over the last couple of years. And we can see it playing out in the market around organisations or firms such as Afterpay, Square, PayPal, Shopify, and so forth. Back in 2021, we had Afterpay being acquired by Square for $29 billion in stock, and this is showing as a really important effect on the overall market. It basically brings Afterpay's merchant relationships across into Square's seller ecosystem, and then it's taking Afterpay's customer base then into the Cash App users. And Square's Cash App is a peer-to-peer payment service which lets you send and receive cash and so forth. The competitors PayPal, Shopify and Intuit are also engaged in a competition or arms race to win this payments war. And they're all sort of struggling to fill the gaps in their offerings and compete. So what we can see playing out here is this fintech or payment system has a potential to disrupt the traditional finance market or the lending institutions. So we're currently going through a reassessment and competition around fintech. How much is it going to affect the traditional financial lending institutions? I guess we'll wait and see in the next couple of years. But this is a current one that you could probably follow to see how it plays out. So to finish off today, next week we're actually going to look at how to create new business models for potentially being able to have disruptive innovation. So thank you for today's session, and I will see you in the workshop.